Union Development Officer. The Union Development Officer leads on events, fundraising and sustainability. They work with USU's events team to create events and foster a socially responsible student community.
Hello, my name is Jess Rolfe and I'm joined in the studio with Charlie Hobson, who's running for the position of Union Development Officer. But quickly, I'd just like to apologise for any language you may have heard in the previous interview. But Charlie, welcome to URY.
Hi.
Hi, so we're going to jump straight into your manifesto here because there's a lot to get through. So your first manifesto point regards reviving campus venues, and specifically you say you want each bar on campus to have its own unique feel fitting to its surroundings. In what ways do you think campus bars should differ more than they already do, and what do you think makes this such a high priority for students?
Yeah, so we sort of see, I think a really good example of this is the Glass House recently. We've seen a transition over to sort of yuzu and sort of really theming it around that. And it's sort of more of that we need across campus. Our venues, in all honesty, haven't been doing the best since COVID. I think that's the same across any sort of business outside of a students' union, let alone student bars. So it's sort of making sure that those bars have their own feel, they've got their own pull, and that, you know, we're offering a variety of bars, a variety of atmospheres.
Mm-hmm. And then on the topic of campus venues, you then go on to say that they should offer a wide range of more affordable options for all students. And you say that this can be achieved by re-evaluating the ways in which products are priced. At a time where union catering services are, according to a recent statement by the union president, in financial deficit, how do you plan to fund a revamp of venues whilst reducing costs for students using the services? Yeah,
so I think what's really key is that a revamp in how a venue feels isn't necessarily a monetary thing. It's not necessarily pumping loads of money into it. It's sort of evolving the events around that bar, sort of seeing what we can do, what small improvements we can make to make that bar really fit in.
Could you give an example of an event you'd put on in a venue that wouldn't be costly?
So, for example, I've recently been Bongos Bingo, you know, so like something that's maybe a little bit more tailored that way. It's not a massively costly event, but it would be popular in my opinion. It's something that, especially if we're offering cheaper pints, we're offering a cheaper ticket than what you would offer in town, then I think overall that's the sort of thing that we can do.
And then on the affordable options, again, in what way would you go about bringing those costs down?
So it's sort of like reevaluating how we do things. Instead of sort of looking at GPs as much, it's more looking at volume sales. So I don't want to sort of commit to any maths on it right now, but just sort of like firing off sort of, if we reduce by 1% in terms of the GP, it's 5% increase in sales that we would need to see, which is something that is doable, especially as you work into numbers and sort of look at what are we actually making on things.
Okay. You also say that reevaluating that pricing would lead to better funding for our student groups. Could you just elaborate what you mean by that?
So I think if we were more affordable, we would attract more students, we would get more people into our bars. Therefore, as I say, pursuing volume rather than GPs. Pursuing more volume ultimately will increase our profit, and that's important for giving back to
For
students.
those that don't know, what is GP?
GP, gross profit.
Awesome. You've also said that when it comes to reviving venues, this shouldn't be done from a desk. In that role, you would look to work more frequently in union venues and be based closer to these during your office hours. What do you mean by this, and in what ways would this benefit students?
So it's sort of, I've worked in several venues across the board, even within town, and you sort of see this change happening from above, but it's very much based on spreadsheets that you see on a computer. Ultimately, it doesn't give the feel of what is it like in that venue, why is this not having the effect we think it should. And ultimately, I think the only way to really answer those questions is by experiencing it.
Okay, so we're going to move on to your second manifesto point, which focuses on an environmentally conscious union. Your first priority in that is to ensure that no single-use plastic is given out by USU, and that investment is focused on reusable and sustainable alternatives for big events. Could you elaborate on what you're intending to change and what alternatives you're proposing and for which big events?
So it's really been strict on that single-use plastic. USU already has a policy on this, but it's then not just thinking in that way, ultimately looking at what biodegradable alternatives we can offer. In big events, outdoors especially, there's certain licensing laws around glass, around not having that there. So ultimately, going to glass isn't it's not the solution. There has to be other alternatives there.
Well, USU at the moment currently gives out next to no single-use plastic. As far as I'm aware, it's none except for the plastic lining and sandwich wrappers and the occasional balloon decoration. Yeah. Considering this is an action that has already been taken place by sabbatical officers, what change are you promising to bring in this area that means students should vote for you?
I think it almost goes back to the point that I made a moment ago about sort of working within venues. You find that that's not necessarily always the case, and it's making sure that really is being pushed and that really is a point that we are keeping to and we're sticking to that.
And then you mentioned in your manifesto on the same environmental topic, the introduction of a too good to go system alongside with innovative new ideas to reduce food waste. Could you briefly explain what those new ideas are and what those systems may look like?
So we see within our venues like Courtyard, we see an amount of waste that goes out. For example, the dough is quite a big one. After so long, it's overproved. You can't really use it for pizzas anymore. What you can do with that dough is make that into bread, which can then be sold the next morning as the 40p beans on toasts. So it's that sort of looking in new ways. Too good to go is something that I've mentioned there, and it's a great system, but obviously for things like that, you need something for raw ingredients in terms of dough. You need more innovative ways.
Do you have anything in mind already about what a new way could be, or is that something to come?
I think that's something to come. I think that's something that needs sort of discussing and lots of ideas around the table.
How would you go about getting those ideas in?
I think definitely liaising with relevant societies. I know Envirosoc are quite obviously big on this issue. So sort of really trying to find the people who have the good ideas on this, who have the things they want to say, and seeing what we can do with that.
Okay. And then your final manifesto point focuses on RAG expectations. You talk about raising and giving, which is RAG. You said that you will use SU venues to push fundraising initiatives. Could you describe how you plan to do this and what that may look like?
So one thing that we see sort of within venues across the country is we see menu items that give a certain percentage of proceeds to a charitable cause, and I think that's something that we can really implement and do well here, really increase what we're giving.
In terms of having special menu items that go towards charity, how would you implement that without increasing costs of items for students?
So I think we're sort of looking at individual items, newer items. It's not necessarily that those items maybe be 5-10p more expensive than what you would have had. But I think it's knowing that you're giving to a good cause at the same time, and I think students would be more happy.
Finally, you mentioned that the visibility of RAG and volunteering opportunities on campus suffered from the pandemic. In the role, how would you increase visibility of these opportunities for students?
I think what's great that's been done at the moment, and it's sort of like just carrying on pushing that forward. I mean, we've seen the Sabs Come Dancing and the Sustainable Fashion Show. Before the pandemic, it was those sorts of events, those sort of RAG events that were quite large on campus, quite big. So it's just trying to get back to that. Obviously, we had so long where it wasn't on campus, and we're still seeing those effects now.
So how would you go about getting students involved in those? Do you have anything in mind?
Again, it would be talking to relevant people. It's it's getting out there. It's sort of really advertising, really pushing the fact that we're doing these things, that these things are available for students.
Definitely.
We utilise things such as a freshers fair and things like that, really just pushing through social medias, through posts.
So before we wrap up quickly, what is the main point of your manifesto you want students to remember in about a word or two?
If you want change within your venues and you want change within events and RAG, definitely vote for me.
We're going to have to wrap up now. We're going to head over to the green room next, but thank you for chatting to me, Charlie.
Thank you.